Hi, this is the recording to accompany the slides for the first out of 3 lectures on the digestive tract. Let's begin. So, what we're going to talk about in this lecture is we're going to go through the various different functions and parts of the digestive system, both the essential organs as well as the accessory organs. Then we're going to talk about the different layers of the digestive wall, including the nerve supply that's found intrinsically within the digestive system. And then we're going to finish off by talking about how digestion is regulated. So when we look at the functions of the digestive tract, we see that there are 2 main functions of the digestive tract. The first one is to break down the food that we eat into nutrients that can be easily absorbed. And the second one is to absorb those essential nutrients into the internal environment. So when we actually look at it, when we eat, and as food travels down through the various parts of the digestive system, it actually is considered to be external to our body unless and until the nutrients get absorbed. So once the nutrients get absorbed, then it gets absorbed into the internal environment. But as long as they're inside the tube that forms our digestive system, they're considered to be in the external environment. As you can see in the table over here, the digestive system doesn't function independently of everything else. It actually needs other systems to function effectively and efficiently. For example, it needs the cardiovascular system to deliver oxygen to the various tissues in order for the digestive system to do its work. And it requires, again, the same cardiovascular system to actually transport nutrients from where it's absorbed to mostly to the liver, where it can get processed, stored, and released at the appropriate time. We also require the endocrine system in terms of digestive function, because the endocrine system releases hormones. So enteroendocrine cells within the digestive tract release hormone to coordinate the overall function of the digestive tract. And you can see here, there is a need for other systems in the body to actually help the digestive system function effectively and efficiently. In terms of the organs of the digestive system, we can separate them into 2 different things. One is organs that form the digestive tract, and they include the mouth, the pharynx, the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, and the anus. And then the other type of organs that's involved in the digestive tract are the accessory organs, most of which do not come into direct contact with the ingested material. So if you look at the list here, obviously the teeth and tongue come into direct contact with the ingested material, but the salivary glands release saliva. And then we've also got the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas that are involved in digestive system, but do not actually come into contact with ingested material. So the food and drinks that enter into our digestive tract. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the basics of the digestive system in this lecture. In the second lecture, we're going to talk about the functions of the organs of the alimentary tract or the digestive tract. And then in the third and last lecture, we're going to focus on the accessory organs, as well as breaking down how each type of nutrient is broken down, digested, as well as absorbed. When we look at this, what we can see here is that if you were to actually stretch out the digestive tract, you would have a very, very long tube. And so this is the mouth, and this is the anus. So when we look at the mouth to the anus, as we put food in our mouth, we see that the first one is the mouth, and then from the mouth, it goes in through the pharynx, and then the esophagus, and then the stomach. And then from the stomach, it goes into the small intestine. And the small intestine is divided into 3 parts. The first part, the most proximal part, is called the duodenum. That's involved in the final digestion. And then the next 2 parts, 5B and 5C, are called the jejunum and the ileum, respectively. After it goes through the ileum, it then goes to the cecum, the first part of, it goes to the large intestine. And the first part of the large intestine is called the cecum. And then from the cecum, it goes to the colon. From the colon, it goes to the rectum. And from the rectum, it goes through the anus to the external environment. Now, at various different points along the digestive tract, there are sphincter muscles. And the sphincter muscles are, with the exception of the one of the sphincter muscles at the anal site, the other sphincter muscles are made out of smooth muscle. So smooth muscle is involuntarily controlled. And so the smooth muscle sphincter are usually closed. And when they're closed, then they prevent the material inside of the digestive tract from moving into the next section, right? And when they're relaxed, what happens is they open up, and so ingested food or ingested material can pass through. So in terms of where the sphincters are located, there's a sphincter located at the proximal end of the esophagus. So between the esophagus and the pharynx. So this is called the upper esophageal sphincter. So that's between the pharynx at the proximal end and the esophagus, right, on the other end of that. And then we've got another sphincter that separates out the distal part of the esophagus from the stomach. So this is the lower esophageal sphincter, is found located between the distal, the end part of the esophagus, and the stomach. And this is very important because the stomach has got a very low pH, right? So it's very acidic. And so what we want is we want the gastric acid to actually stay in the stomach, and we want it to stop going up into the esophagus or down into the small intestine. And so there is another sphincter in between the small intestine, the stomach and the small intestine, and that is called the pyloric sphincter. And so the pyloric sphincter regulates how much content goes from the stomach to the small intestine, and also prevents a lot of excessive acid from the stomach entering into the small intestine. Between the 3 different parts of the small intestine, there are no sphincters, but there is a sphincter between the last part of the small intestine and the first part of the large intestine. And so if you look at the name of the sphincter, it's named after that. So it's named after the last part of the small intestine and the first part of the large intestine. So that's between the small intestine and the large intestine. And then the last main sphincter that's found within the digestive tract are the 2 anal sphincters. So the inner one is made out of smooth muscle, and the outer one is made out of skeletal muscle. So the 2 anal sphincters are located between the anus and the external environment. There is a couple of other ducts or openings in the small intestine, in the first part of the small intestine, and these are the accessory duct and the hepatopancreatic duct. So the accessory duct is located between the pancreas and the duodenum, the first part of the small intestine. And this one transports pancreatic juices that the pancreas produces straight into the duodenum. The hepatopancreatic duct or sphincter is also located with an opening into the duodenum. The difference between the hepatopancreatic sphincter and the accessory duct is that the hepato refers to liver. What happens is the hepatopancreatic ampulla, so an ampulla is like a container, actually mixes in concentrated bile that's been stored in the gallbladder with pancreatic juices from obviously the pancreas. And what happens is the bile that's stored in the gallbladder can be 10 times more concentrated than bile that's produced directly from the liver. And so it needs to be diluted before it can actually enter into the duodenum. And so what happens is it gets mixed in the ampulla, and then the hepatopancreatic sphincter is located right here, right in the first part of the small intestine. And so that allows dilute bile to be mixed in, that's mixed in with the pancreatic juices to enter into the duodenum for the final chemical digestion. This is just an overview slide telling you about the various different parts of the digestive tract, including the accessory organs. So again, it's there for you to look at and to learn about. And again, this is just a summary slide, so I'll explain this as we actually go along. What you can see over here is that the job of the pharynx and esophagus is really just to transport food from the mouth into the esophagus and from the esophagus into the stomach. There is no digestion or absorption happening in these two parts of the digestive tract. And we'll look more at it in the second recorded lecture. When we talk about ingested material, sometimes I'll refer to it as food, even though it's gone through different parts of the digestive tract. But technically speaking, food is what we put in our mouth. And when we swallow what we put into our mouth, it becomes a bolus. And the word bolus sounds like ball because that's what happens. So when we put food in our mouth, we chew it, mastication, and then we swallow it, deglutition. But before we actually swallow it, as we're chewing it, what happens is saliva is secreted into our mouth. And then with the help of our tongue, we actually form a ball that's easily swallowed. And that formation of a ball forms a bolus, right? So soft round ball that's been chewed and then swallowed to make its way to the stomach. And when it's in the stomach, what happens is it gets mixed in with the gastric juices, not only acid, but other liquid that the stomach produces. And that liquefaction of the stomach contents help to form chyme. And then chyme then moves to the small intestine and along the rest of the digestive tract, right? So if you look over here, chyme is more acidic because it's been mixed in with the gastric juices. It's semi-liquefied, creamy, still has some of the natural tone of food, and then it's partially finished with digestion because food stays in the stomach for quite a long time, a few hours, and so in that time, digestion does occur. When we look at the different digestive system processes, what we can see here is we've got 6 processes listed over here. So ingestion happens when we put food in our mouth. Defecation happens when the contents that have not been digested and have not been absorbed leave our digestive tract, right? Defecation is the release of feces from our large intestine. Now, with the others, what happens is you've got propulsion, and propulsion is the actual movement of the ingested contents through the gut. And so food moves towards the anus. So food moves anally through the gut. And this propulsion includes swallowing, which is voluntary, includes peristalsis, and also includes some mixing as well. So propulsion is the movement of the food as it makes its way through the digestive tract until it emerges through the anus through defecation. Now, this too, the digestion, we've got chemical and mechanical digestion. So exactly as it sounds, mechanical is sometimes called physical digestion, and it's the breaking down of food into smaller pieces. So it's like if you get a large carrot and you chop it up into small chunks, right? Each chunk is still a carrot. Each chunk still has the properties of a carrot. It's just that each of the smaller chunk is just smaller. Chemical digestion is when you've got complex particles being broken down, usually by enzymes, into smaller components, right? So again, if you were to take the carrot and you're breaking it apart chemically into whatever chemicals make up a carrot, that's what chemical digestion is. And the thing is that when we break down food that we eat into smaller, simpler components, they're then easier to absorb. And then the fifth process here is absorption. And absorption is when digested material moves from the digestive tract in through either the blood, cardiovascular system, or the lymphatic system, right? So that's what absorption is. Now, 90% of absorption happens in the small intestine, and the other 10% happens in either the stomach or the large intestine. Now, what we can see is that propulsion happens all the time throughout the gut as the food moves from the mouth to the anus. Mechanical and chemical digestion can occur at the same time, and absorption happens as the ingested material becomes small enough and simple enough for it to actually move into either the blood or the lymphatic system. So again, most of the absorption happens in the small intestine, but some of it happens after that, and some of it happens before that in the stomach. When we look at the wall of the digestive tract, we see that there are four general layers in the digestive wall. The outermost layer is the serosa, followed by the muscularis, the muscle layers. And there are two, in most parts of the digestive tract, there are two layers of muscle. The first layer is circular, and the second layer is longitudinal, right? And then the next layer in is the submucosa, and then the innermost layer, the deepest layer, is the mucosa. The mucosa is the only layer that's normally in contact with ingested material. All the other layers don't have direct contact with the ingested material, but gets information from various sensors. So we'll start from the innermost layer. The innermost layer is the one that opens up to the lumen. And remember, the lumen is the hollow inside part of a tube, right? And so the mucosa is the only layer that is in direct contact with the lumen and with ingested food, right? Because that's the mucosal layer. In terms of the structure of the mucosal layer, you've got epithelium layer that has a free surface, and that's the one that's in contact with the ingested material. You've got a layer of loose, fibrous connective tissue that contains blood vessels as well as lymphatic vessels. And so they help to deliver oxygen, and they help to transport nutrients that have been absorbed from the lumen of the digestive tract. And also we've got a thin layer of smooth muscle that allows the contraction of the mucosal layer to increase the surface area. So what happens is the muscularis mucosa helps to, instead of making the mucus layer flat, it helps to form these villi that then help to increase the surface area in order to speed up digestion and speed up absorption. When we look at the epithelium, which is the innermost layer, and that's the one that is in contact with the food, we can see that in areas where absorption and secretion happens, what happens is the epithelium is a single layer, simple columnar epithelium. And that is so that absorption happens quickly and secretion also happens quickly. But at the top and bottom end, so at the level of the esophagus as well as the anus, what happens is when the bolus goes through the esophagus, it's still fairly rough. And so you want multiple layers, stratified, flat epithelium. And that's to protect against wear and tear and injury. And the same with the epithelium down at the anus level. Again, when feces emerges out from the rectum through the anus, it is fairly rough. And so you want the stratified squamous epithelium in order to protect against wear and tear. And also there's no absorption happening at the level of the anus there. The next layer in is the submucosal layer. And so what you can see here is the submucosal layer has a plexus. And the plexus is a network of nerves that have the same general function. So the plexus that's found in the submucosal layer is called the submucosal plexus. And what the submucosal plexus does is it coordinates the release of digestive secretion into the lumen via ducts. And we're going to look at what to coordinate the secretions as well as react to the presence of food. So it coordinates the secretions that is formed, released by exocrine glands. And again, it's exocrine because, again, anything that's inside the lumen, inside the tube of the digestive tract, is still considered external to the body's environment. And so the secretions are considered exocrine. Within the submucosal layer, we've got the continuation of the blood vessels and the lacteals, the lymphatic capillaries, again, to deliver oxygen, remove waste, and to transport digested contents which have been absorbed. The blood vessels transports that towards the liver. The lacteals transports that along the lymphatic system. And as I said, we've got the submucosal plexus to help to regulate the secretions into the digestive tract, as well as to react to the presence of food. Next layer is the muscularis, or the muscle layers. As I said, because the digestive tract is mainly a tube, what happens is that there are two different layers of the digestive tract that are organized in different orientation. Firstly, we have got the we've got the circular layer, and then we've also got a second layer that is the longitudinal muscle layer. And what happens is the coordinated contraction and relaxation of these two layers of the gut. I just realized it's I've just gone forward. So you've got the circular as well as the longitudinal. And these two, contraction and relaxation in the coordinated function of these two layers, help to both mix the contents within the gut as well as to propel them along the digestive tract towards the anus. The only part of the digestive tract that's not a tube is the stomach. So the stomach is more of a 3D organ. And because it's a three-dimensional organ, it still has the circular and the longitudinal, but it also has a third layer that's at an angle, and that's the oblique muscle. And the presence of the third layer of smooth muscle helps to mix the contents with the gastric juices more effectively. The contraction and relaxation of the muscle layer is controlled by nerves in the myenteric plexus. So again, if you look at the name, plexus is a network of nerves. Myenteric, myo refers to muscle, enteric refers to the gut or the digestive system. So the myenteric plexus controls the muscle of the gut, right? And so it's the myenteric plexus as well as the submucosal plexus is both part of the big brain as well as the little brain. And we'll talk more about that as we continue on. And then the serosal layer, which is the outermost layer of the digestive tract, as you can see over here, consists of a layer of connective tissue as well as the epithelium facing into the peritoneal cavity, right? The serosa is continuous with this mesentery. So if you actually see a mesentery, it kind of is found within the folds of the small intestine and the large intestine. And what you can see here is the mesentery contains blood vessels, so arteries and veins, as well as nerves supplying the digestive system. So in terms of the nerves, you've got the two divisions of the autonomic nervous system going in through these nerves, and that's the parasympathetic as well as the sympathetic divisions of the autonomic nervous system. The epithelium layer of the serosa secretes fluids, serosal fluid, to actually reduce friction in the abdominal cavity. Because what happens is the digestive tract is like a very long rope or a tube. And when food actually goes in and moves around in the small intestine and large intestine, it actually slides the whole thing back and forth, up and down. And so you need that serosal fluid to actually reduce friction in the abdominal cavity. In terms of the movement within the gut is often referred to as motility. And so motility in the gut is movement of smooth muscle, so involuntarily controlled. And there's two main types of motility, right? The first type is peristalsis, and peristalsis moves ingested content from the mouth down towards the anus. So this directed movement is either called aboral movement, so away from the mouth, or anal movement towards the anus. And what it does is you've got progressive, sequential, alternating waves of contraction and relaxation. So you see over here, this is the bolus used to be here. And when the circular muscle contracts, and followed by a contraction of the longitudinal muscle, it moves the bolus from there down to this current position. And then when the circular muscle, after the longitudinal muscle contract and then relax, circular muscle contract over here, longitudinal muscle contract over here, pushes this bolus that was there down towards the anus, and then you repeat as it travels towards the anus away from the mouth. Second type of motility is called segmentation or mixing and churning. So depending on which part of the digestive tract you're referring to. And this mixing, churning, segmentation helps to mix the ingested content with the juices that are found in that part of the digestive tract. And when the contents, ingested contents mix with the juices, then what you have is you produce at the end of the day a mush that's been completely mixed in, right? So instead of having boluses of blue and boluses of orange, it's the mixing in, the segmentation movement that actually produce this uniform mush, and that helps to bring digestive food in contact with the mucosa to facilitate absorption, as well as bringing digestive food in contact with the digestive juices in order to help with both mechanical and chemical digestion. So in segmentation, there is no aboral movement. Basically, these two parts stay in roughly the same spot within the digestive tract. And what you have is you just have mixing happening locally. So, and that happens as part of the digestion and absorption process. When we get to regulation of the digestive tract, there is fast and slow. So fast regulation is through neural control. Instant involves all three divisions of the autonomic nervous system. And if you remember, the three divisions of the autonomic nervous system is the enteric nervous system that is found entirely within the walls of the digestive tract, the sympathetic division, which slows down digestion, and the parasympathetic division that speeds up digestion overall. We also have hormonal control, and like hormones elsewhere in the body, it takes a little bit longer, but it also lasts longer once the hormones are released. Within the digestive tract, we have several different sensory or afferent inputs. The first one detects the presence of a mass, a bolus or chyme inside the digestive tract. And so this presence stretches that part of the digestive tract. So you can see that in this part, what happens is the mechanoreceptors in this part of the digestive tract recognize that it's stretched, and so it activates peristalsis. We also have chemoreceptors, and chemoreceptors are the taste buds of the digestive tract, because depending on whether you eat a lot of protein, a lot of fat, a lot of carbs, there are different enzymes and different processes to help to effectively and efficiently digest that food. And then we also have osmoreceptors to detect a sodium and water concentration in order to actually maintain fluid balance, fluid electrolyte balance. So these are all inputs that go into the nervous, that go into for neural and hormonal control of the digestive system. In terms of outputs, so what happens is that there is outputs to the smooth muscle that help with mixing and peristalsis. There's outputs to endocrine glands that involves the secretion of hormones to regulate overall digestion. And there are outputs, again, to exocrine glands that release their contents into the lumen of the digestive tract. And the exocrine glands secrete enzymes, juices, mucus to promote digestion, to promote absorption, and to promote movement. When we talk about the neural regulation of the GI tract, I want to introduce to you the concept of little brain versus big brain. So we talk about the little brain as the brain that's contained entirely within the walls of the gastrointestinal tract. And this is the enteric nervous system. And again, enteric means intestinal, or it can be used to mean gut. So enteric nervous system is the nervous system that's inside the digestive tract. It involves short reflexes because it does not need to go up to the central nervous system, right? So short reflexes contained entirely within the gut walls. And so this little brain, the enteric nervous system, can function independently of the central nervous system. So if you were to take a piece of gut out, whether it be the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, you take it out, you put it in an appropriate organ bath, and you string it up, what happens is you can see peristalsis happening, right? Because of the enteric nervous system that's contained entirely within the gut walls. The big brain is the central nervous system. And so we're talking about the big brain as it relates to the sympathetic and the parasympathetic divisions of the autonomic nervous system. So it involves long reflexes because what happens is it needs to send the sensory input into the central nervous system, either in the spinal cord or the brain, before it processes and sends an output back to the gut, right? So the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions of the autonomic nervous system require the central nervous system. And so without it, it won't function. So here are the three divisions. As I said, the enteric nervous system is the little brain, can function independently of the central nervous system. And we've got the myenteric plexus that regulates smooth muscle contraction within the gut walls, as well as a submucosal plexus that regulates secretion into the gut lumen. The parasympathetic division of the nervous system stimulates digestion. In fact, it's sometimes called rest and digest through both the vagus nerve, the 10th cranial nerve, as well as the pelvic nerve. The sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system is also part of the big brain because it needs the central nervous system to function, and overall it inhibits digestive function so that more of the blood is diverted away from the gut towards skeletal muscle to actually voluntarily run from the bear or to handle whatever triggered the sympathetic division. In terms of the hormonal and chemical regulation of the gastrointestinal tract, we've got these 8 hormones and chemicals, and we're going to talk about this as we go on in the next few lectures. So again, this is just an overview of some of the 8 hormones and chemicals that are involved in regulation of the digestive system. And then the last slide talks about enzymes. So as you might remember, enzymes work by lowering the activation energy for a reaction to occur. So without an enzyme, we will need this much energy to get the reaction going. But in the presence of the enzyme, you only need this much energy to get going. So it's much less energy needed to actually start the reaction, to activate the reaction. And because there's a lower energy required, the reaction can go much quicker in order to produce more of these products, right? Digestive enzymes are like all other enzymes in the body. They're made of proteins. And so because they are proteins, they are constantly being destroyed and constantly being synthesized, right? Digestive enzymes operate in the lumen of the digestive tract outside of any cells. So what happens is we've got the lumen over here, and then you've got enzymes over here to act on whatever ingested substances are found in the lumen of the digestive tract. Enzymes are specific in their action. So the enzyme that breaks down lactose, is called lactase and only breaks down lactose, the disaccharide. The one that breaks down maltose, another disaccharide, is maltase. And maltase only breaks down maltose, the disaccharide, and so on and so forth. So it's very specific in their action, binds to a single substrate or a single part of a single of a substrate, and can only perform that one thing, right? So you see over here, substrate has to fit within the active side of the protein enzyme over here. And once it fits into the active site, it changes its shape slightly in order to trigger the reaction. And in this case, this is a catabolic reaction because you've got one bigger molecule as the starting substrate, and that produces two smaller products at the end, right? So this is a catabolic a reaction. And again, this is what happens in a chemical digestion of ingested material in the digestive tract. So it breaks down more complex, chemically complex substrates into chemically simpler and smaller products. Two last things is that enzymes in the digestive tract function at an optimal pH. So for example, we've got these three enzymes over here, pepsin, amylase, and trypsin. Pepsin only works in the stomach, and I know this because it's active only within the pH of 2 and 4, which is very acidic, and it's the pH that the stomach is of the stomach environment. So this is the level of activity on here on the y-axis, and so you can see level of activity in acidic environments is very, very high. But level of activity as the environment becomes more alkaline drops. And so pepsin is only active in the stomach, and the small intestine is more basic in terms of its pH. And so pepsin stops working in the small intestine. And in the small intestine, we've got a couple of other enzymes that we show over here. One is amylase. Amylase breaks down carbs, whereas pepsin breaks down proteins. And trypsin also breaks down proteins. And as you can see here, trypsin is not active, zero activity when it gets down, when the pH gets too low, but nice level of activity when the pH becomes bigger. So it's active in the small intestine, right? And amylase is also active in the small intestine as well as in the mouth. So again, amylase not active in acidic environment, neither is trypsin. Amylase and trypsin are only active in more basic environments. The last thing I'm going to say is that some enzymes are synthesized and released as their inactive versions. And the inactive version is called a zymogen. And so what happens is a lot of enzymes that digest proteins are released as zymogens because we don't want it to digest the protein that forms the gut wall, right? So we want to actually protect the gut wall. And so it's released as an inactive proenzyme, and then something, a chemical, then activates it when it's appropriate in the presence of proteins, food proteins, and so it can digest food proteins when it's there. So again, zymogens, you've got it being activated to become the active version of the enzyme, and the active version of the enzyme can then start digesting the ingested material. Again, we're going to look at these concepts as we go on in the next couple of lectures.